Welcome back. Welcome back to Coffee with Krav. Welcome to the 42nd episode where I have conversations with different people from different walks of life, and I'm looking to educate, entertain, and, have some fun. So I'm really excited about today's guest. Do you ever wake up in the middle of the night and you have a million things going through your mind? You can't fall back to sleep. Do you know people that are self-sabotaging themselves in their life and those around them? Do you ever wonder why this is happening? Would you like to get some great suggestions or solutions that can help you or others with this and other head trash that's going on? Well, you're in the right place today. We have Dr. Robyn Odegaard in the house. So let me start by reading her bio. Dr. Robyn, affectionately known as Mental MacIver, is a former competitive beach volleyball player turned business psychologist and professional confidant. She did her graduate work in business psychology with a concentration in high performance and sport. She has been working in the space between executive coach, therapist, and best friend for more than 15 years and has designed her business to support ultra busy clients who live excessively fast paced and often global lives. Dr. Robbins' expertise has been showcased through her TED Talk, Creating Success Out of Chaos, the 7 books she authored and co authored or contributed to, her 5 point paradigm for creating success out of chaos, and her signature talk, Taking Out the Head Trash How to Fight the Demons Keeping You Awake at 3 in the morning. In her downtime, she enjoys reading astrophysics for fun, go figure, gardening, hiking with her husband, and teaching her dog Nebula to do circus tricks. So, welcome to Coffee with Krav, Dr. Robyn.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I'm very excited about this conversation.
Excellent. So, I'm going to start by going back to your childhood. You
Mm.
grew up on a small farm. First of all, where was it, and what was some of the early lessons that you learned there?
So I grew up in Central California, and we raised beef and cattle and rabbits, and I had a pony named Thunder who was phenomenal. But we were very, very poor, very poor. And I was a member of a cult. I didn't know it at the time, didn't know it until I was in grad school when I started reading about cults. And I was like, wait a minute, this sounds like my upbringing. So that was really interesting. And then when we talked, I did tell you I was married off at 18 to my first cousin. So I graduated from high school, got married, and was moved 3,000 miles from home within 3 weeks.
Unbelievable. Well, um, let's see. Let's go to the cult.
Okay.
Please. I mean, I've never been involved in a cult, so you're probably the first person that I've ever spoke to that was part of a cult. So, how did you? What did the cult do? How did you find out that it was a cult? So please talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the cult was very much about men have one role and women have another role. I was definitely groomed very early on that I wasn't very smart. I wasn't going to be able to feed myself. And I absolutely needed a man to put a roof over my head and make sure that I was safe in the world, tell me how to vote, things like that. And I realized, well, so let me tell a little bit how I got out, because that's kind of a funny story too. So I moved to North Carolina. It took me about 6 months to realize three things about my new husband. One, he wasn't very bright. Two, he was very badly in debt. And three, he had a drug problem.
Hmm.
But those three things ended up being silver linings. So the last thing my father had said to me before I walked down the aisle was, "You are no longer welcome in my home as a single woman." So I couldn't leave. I had nowhere to go. And besides, I'm resilient to the point of being stubborn. So I was like, I made a commitment, I'm staying. But 8.5 years later, he threw me out. Fortunately for me, prior to that, he had made me get a job because he was badly in debt. And he hadn't been able to maintain the grooming that had been put in place, that I wasn't very smart and that I needed a man. Like all the stuff the cult had told me, he hadn't been able to maintain that. So when he threw me out, I was very fortunate. My best friend, who I had met at work, had a spare bedroom she let me move into. I had a job, and I was about 26 at that point, figuring out, who am I and how do I adult and what does that look like? Now, what's funny about that story is several years later, he came back and he wanted to try again. And I laughed at him. I was like, there is no way, you've lost your mind. And he said to me, oh, but I love you. You're the only woman I've ever loved. And I said to him, the last thing you said to me was, I don't love you. I don't want to be married to you. And I don't want you living in my house. And he's like, well, let me tell you what happened. I'm all ears. Please tell me what happened. And he starts naming names and talking about people who I remember, like I had been to parties at their house. And I knew that they were involved in cocaine because when we were at parties, there was always lines of cocaine on the table. And all you had to do was pick up a straw. Like there were lots of options. I never did. That was never my thing. But he starts naming these names and then he's like, so they were part of a drug ring. And I'm like, well, obviously, I mean, there was drugs everywhere all of the time. And he said, yes, but they were also part of the cartel. And I'm like, what? Turns out this is too crazy to even believe it's true. The cartel had realized my husband had really good credit because I had fixed his credit. Thank you, Robyn, for fixing my credit. And the cartel wanted to steal his identity, which they did do. He almost ended up in federal prison. But they recognized that I did our family finances and I was going to be a problem. So they convinced him that I was holding him back and that he could do better than me. And that's why he threw me out. So if I ever write that book, it's going to be called I Like to Thank the Cartel because they got me out of a cult.
So cults, cartel, what a beginning of your life. And you had successes growing up. You were valedictorian in high school.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You had excellence in volleyball.
No, I didn't
Uh,
play volleyball till after I got out of the
oh,
cult in my late 20s.
your late 20s. That's when you had
Mm-hmm.
excellence.
That's when I played volleyball.
But
Yeah.
yeah, you were valedictorian of your high school. Yet
Mm-hmm.
the men in your life were saying how, you can't do anything, that you're average, that yet you had all these other successes. How did that play with your mind?
So I was often told that the only reason I succeeded was because other people didn't try. So I also I
So
don't know
your whole
why.
grade didn't try. The whole
No,
grade. You only
whole
you
school,
tried.
nobody
The whole school
tried.
didn't try. Okay.
Right.
Just all right.
Yeah. So as
That makes
long as
sense.
we're clear, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And then even so, my dad let me run in a beauty pageant. I do not to this day know why, but he let me run in a beauty pageant when I was in high school, and I won. And my dad said to me, "Of course you did. You were running against cows."
Interesting.
The reason I was valedictorian, he told me it's easy to look like an eagle when you're being compared to turkeys.
Wow. Is Dad still around?
Oh yeah, my parents are still around. Yes.
Do we
Mm-hmm.
talk to Dad?
I do talk to him. Here's what I've realized, and it took me lots of therapy. But what I've realized is that my father wasn't malicious. He was misinformed. He just didn't know. He did the best he could. Like he legitimately thought that I would not be able to feed myself. And so he found a man to feed me. So
Mm.
was he wrong? Yes. Is he still often wrong? Does he understand what I do? No. But as long as we stick to topics that he's comfortable with, the cattle, the horses, the grandchildren, it's fine. And I do try very hard to give him grace in that way because he loved
Is
me the
he
best he
still part
could.
of the cult?
Yes. My parents
Do you
both
want
are,
to
and several
mention
of
the
my
cult's
brothers.
name?
So
Or you
it's
don't
a
want to?
Calvinist based cult. And if you ask, and this is true of anyone in a cult, if you asked him, he would actually be angry that I define it as a cult because he doesn't think that it's a cult. And I'm not going to argue with him about that.
Hmm.
But my experience when I was in grad school and we started studying cults and this is what they do and this is how they behave and this is how they brainwash people, I had an epiphany. So in my 30s, oh, I grew up in a cult. I had no idea.
Wow. Oh my God. Okay. Well, I might refer back to the cult just because it's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But let's get on to some of the subjects that we're looking at here today. And you've been called a mental MacGyver. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to know how you got that name.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to talk about different issues that people have, and we're going to find out how you MacGyver out of it. But first, tell the audience, tell everyone, how'd you get the name Mental MacGyver?
So I was talking to a client who he has exited a marketing and branding firm very successfully. We were having a very interesting conversation. And toward the end of the conversation, he said, all you need is a button, some bubble gum and a button, bubble gum, and some string, I think is what he said. and you can make it work. And I laughed and I said, oh yeah, I'm like a mental MacGyver. And he stopped cold. He was like, if that's available, you need to use that. That is exactly what you do. And I kind of laughed. Like I thought we were having a little joke. He's like, I am not kidding you right now. You need to, so Russ is my husband. He's my web guy. He does web design and graphic design. He's like, you need to text Russ right now and see if mentalmacgyver.com is available. Because if it is, you need to buy it immediately, if not sooner. And I'm like, okay, fine. So while I'm on Zoom with him, I text my husband, hey, is this URL available? If so, will you please grab it for me? And my husband texts back a few minutes later and says, it is, I bought it. What are we doing with it? So
Oh, that's
that's
funny.
how I ended up with Mental MacGyver. It was given to me by a branding and marketing expert who I happen to be working with.
Okay, so let's see if we can help the audience here.
Okay.
Let's first talk about imposter syndrome. I know what the definition is. Maybe not everybody knows what the definition is. So if you can define it, let's talk about it, and then let's go over solutions that can help people get through it. So what's imposter syndrome?
So imposter syndrome is the belief that you aren't good enough, you don't know enough, you need more, you are in no position to tell anyone anything about your area of expertise. And what's interesting about imposter syndrome is that the more you know, the less you feel like you know, because, and you've probably experienced this, the more you know about a subject, the more that you realize, oh my goodness, there's so much to know.
Right.
And so often I kind of jokingly say the only people who don't have imposter syndrome are the imposters, because they're the ones who don't know enough that they don't actually know what they're talking about.
Interesting. And that's not the same thing as fake it till you make it, right? That's
No,
like
it's
the
very
opposite of
different.
it, right?
It's
That's the
very
opposite
different. Yeah.
of that. So so if someone has imposter syndrome, you know, how do you help them? What do you suggest?
So the first thing that I like to do with imposter syndrome is you have to know what you know and you don't know. And a lot of people, if you start asking them, tell me what you know about this subject, they can talk about it, but then they're like, but there's people who know so much more. And so I like to tell this story because it's a really good example. I was in New York City and I was at an event where they were doing radio interviews and TV interviews. And so the first day they did all the radio, the second day they were going to do TV. And as we're leaving the studio, the producer guy says to everybody, hey, we're doing TV tomorrow. Everybody, including the men, you need to wear makeup, at least powder, or you're going to look terrible under the lights. And I was like, okay. So we're walking out. And this woman who I had been friendly with over the course of the day, I'd seen her in passing or whatever, comes running up to me and she's like, Robyn, you have to help me. I don't know anything about makeup. And immediately I'm thinking, we're in New York City. There are probably 100,000 people in New York City who are makeup experts. I am not one of them.
Hmm.
And I told her, I'm like, I'm not a makeup expert. And she said, Robyn, I've watched your videos on your YouTube channel. I know you always look good on video. I know nothing. You know more than I do. Please help me. Now, in that moment, I could have said, imposter syndrome. I know nothing about makeup. There are so many people who know more. I'm sorry. But what I realized was I know more than she does. And in this moment, I am the expert for her
Hmm.
and I can help her. So when I tell that story as an example of there are going to be people you run into who know more than you do. You are not an expert to them. You should learn from them. But for your area of expertise, you probably know more than, say, 85, maybe 90% of the population. If you allow your imposter syndrome to say, oh, there's 10% of the world who knows more than I do, you're failing the people you're supposed to be helping with your knowledge because you're not sharing it.
So would you say those people have a little bit of lack of confidence that they should just have the confidence to say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I know 80 or 90% of more than the world, I'm okay with this. Is that
And the thing I'd remind people is confidence isn't something you have to feel. It's something other people have to see. And so I encourage my clients, watch TV with the sound off. Pick out the people on the screen who are confident. Why are they confident? What are you seeing that they're doing that makes you believe they're confident? And then emulate those behaviors, and the world will experience you as confident, and you will get feedback that you are confident, and that will help you feel more confident.
interesting? Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Another subject, procrastination,
Oh,
putting off what you should do today to another day. Why do people procrastinate?
There's a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's we don't know what we actually don't know what we're supposed to do. We're unsure, we're uncomfortable, we're not confident in what we're trying to do. My house is never so clean as when I'm procrastinating. Suddenly I need to vacuum, you know. So there's a lot of different reasons we do it. And a lot of times it's because it's hard. I don't want to. I'm not, I just, it's not on my list, whatever. I have a rule that keeps me from procrastinating. So I'm a list maker. And every day I take my list that has all the markings off of the things I did yesterday and I write a new list of, okay, these are the things that are still on the list. If something gets moved 1, 2, 3 times, at that point, once it's been moved 3 times on a list, I either do it, delegate, or drop it. Because either it's going to get done, it needs to be done, I need to do it. I can delegate it to someone else because I don't want to do it, or it's not going to get done, I'm going to drop it. And there, you'd be surprised how many things get on my list, and then 3 times later I realize, nope, I'm dropping that. I'm not
So
doing
so
that
let me
thing.
let me ask fundamentally. Okay, so
Mhm.
let's say I want to take that into consideration. First of all, is your list on your phone? Do you write it out? Is it in a notebook? Where do
I'm a
you,
paper person.
okay,
I like pieces of paper. If that doesn't work for someone, like I have clients who definitely prefer electronic lists, that's fine too. I like paper because I can mark it off, I can see, I can make progress. The one rule I do have in the house, my husband one time did something on my list, or no, I did something on my list. He noticed it was done and he marked it off. And I was like, don't mark things off my list that I did. I want to mark it off.
that's funny. So another question, and I know this is technical, but
It's
you know,
okay.
this is helping people if they've never made a list before. So in your, so you're right, I need to take out the trash, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And then you procrastinate, you don't do it. So it goes to the next day. So you have a second list that goes to the next day. And then if you don't take out the trash again, it goes to the third day. Now you're going to delete it, or you're not going to do it, or you okay.
Right. You're going to do it, delegate, or drop. Those are your options.
Do it, delegate, or drop. Do you put like a little star next to it when it goes from one day to the next? Like, how do you know that it's the third day?
I know I mentally keep track of it. I know
Okay.
that I know that this thing needs to be done and I'm not doing it. That's, I
Oh, so
mean,
you're
if it is
avoiding.
something you want to put a mark like a 1, a 2, a 3, whatever, that's fine. But I know when I've moved it 3 times.
Okay, got it. Okay. So I've seen some of your videos, and you talk about negative people,
Mhm.
and you ask, is there water in the well?
Mhm.
I like the way you phrase that. Can you please talk more about that?
Yeah, it's one of those things that oftentimes we go to people for things they don't have to give or they're not willing to give. And especially this is true for family members. We go there looking for love and support and kindness. But if you have someone in your life who doesn't have that to give, if you keep going there, it's like going to a well looking for a drink when there's no water there. So when you learn there's no water in a well, stop going there looking for a drink. And I had to do that with my parents. I love them. They're great. They've tried their best and I respect that and I give them grace. But I know I can't go to them looking for them to be proud of me for the work that I do. They don't understand it. The very first time I was ever on the radio, I sent the audio to my dad and I was like, I was on the radio. And I just wanted my dad to say, good job, Robyn. I got back a red line transcript basically saying, you shouldn't have said this. You shouldn't have said that. You stuttered here. Don't do. And I'm like, really?
Really?
You're not an expert in media. You're a high school teacher. Just say, good job, Robyn. On my first book, I sent it to my mom and I just wanted her to say, you wrote a book. That's so impressive. And when I asked her about it, she said, I didn't think it was very interesting. Now, to be fair, my mother's not the target audience for my first book. So I was
Right.
asking for something she didn't have to give. But stop going to a well looking for a drink when you learn there's no water in it.
Okay. That's a great lesson. So I read that since the pandemic, alcohol use is up 66%, smoking's up 22%, meth use is up 300%. People are self-sabotaging. What are the four self-sabotages?
So there's several different ones. The most common ones I see, one of them is absolutely self-medication, which you just mentioned.
Mhm.
And that is something I can help people with at some level. Sometimes they need an addiction expert. It really depends. But yeah, self-medication is a big one. I wrote an article on LinkedIn about the alcohol culture. And so people can certainly read about that if they are interested in that. Imposter syndrome is a self-sabotage. May not be your fault. It is your problem, something that you have to figure out. Also, hyper independence, that belief that you have to stubbornly do it all yourself, being afraid to accept help, that this whole idea of if you want it done right, you do it yourself. That's refusing to delegate. If you're the type of person who believes you can only trust yourself, that's a trauma response. It usually means that somewhere in your childhood, you had an adult on whom you could not rely and you had to trust yourself and only yourself. Unfortunately, we carry that behavior into adulthood and we don't delegate when we should. We don't ask for help. We don't lean on people. We try to do it all ourselves. That hyper independence trauma response absolutely is a self-sabotaging behavior. We talked a little bit about procrastination, but a big one that I see in business owners is research as procrastination, using this idea that I just need to know a little bit more and then I'll be able to, 80% is good enough, release it. That's true for delegating too. If you can find someone that can do it at 80%, let them do the 80% and pick up the 20 that drops.
Interesting. And hyper independence.
Mm.
Let's dive into that just a little bit. What what would you MacGyver? What would you suggest to someone like that? If they only want to do everything all themselves. I don't need anybody else. I'm the smartest, greatest, whatever. I don't want to rely on anyone else. I know if I do it, it's going to be right. So
So
what
the
do you
first
say to
thing
someone like
I
that?
would say is your life working that way? If they are happy with where their life is, they're happy with the size of their business, they're happy with, then do that. I mean, who am I to change it? I mean, that's fine if you're happy. But if they come to me, it's usually because my business is stagnating. I haven't been able to get it past this point. This thing isn't working. And sometimes people are hyper independent about doing things that they aren't actually the best at. There are
Mm.
other people who could do it better. So the first thing, if someone comes to me, is I'm going to start kind of gently asking questions. Hey, let's talk about this. And I may not diagnose hyperindependence right away. I may ask a lot of questions. Oh, do you think that this is something you need to do? Why do you need to sit on the phone for 2 hours talking to your insurance agent? Why don't you have someone that does that for you? And over time, these conversations will lead to an aha moment where someone will say, oh, I am really trying to do it all myself, aren't I? And then we can start looking at what can you do and what can you delegate? And part of that is recognizing, again, back to what are you good at? What are you not good at? Where is your zone of genius that you really want to be in? That's the
Mm.
thing you want to do. And then where's your zone of tolerance? And how much zone of tolerance is kind of 10% pretty good, 80%, yeah, it's not as good as pretty good, but it's pretty decent. And then 10% horrible. And if I can get at least the 10% horrible to start getting off their plate, that can usually be helpful.
It's also very inefficient,
Oh,
right?
terribly
Very, very
inefficient.
inefficient
Yeah.
for these people. Well, thank you for that. So I have a friend that tells me he's up at 2 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, can't sleep. Has so many things running around in his head. He's picking up his iPad, his phone. He's sometimes turning on TV, maybe reading. He's got so many things going on in his brain. Maybe the head trash that you talked about
Mm-hmm.
before. If he was listening today, how would you help him?
So the first thing I would like to do is give him a tool that says, if you are awake at 2 in the morning before we've had time to deal with the head trash, here's a tool you can use that'll help you get back to sleep. There is studies that support this. It sounds super simple. It actually works. I use this tool. Pick a word, any word. I don't care what it is. Quiet.
Sleep, sleep.
Sleep. Fine. We'll use sleep. The first thing you're going to do, sleep. Okay, the first letter is S. I want you to think about all the words that you can think of that start with the word S.
Hmm.
At least 3, 5, 7, however many. Think of how many words, how many can you think of with the letter S? Once you get done with that, okay, move on to the next one. Sleep. L. All right. How many words can I think of that start with the letter L? Again, 3, 5, 7, however many you think of. Then E. Then E again. Can you think of different words for E? and then P. And so you're going to do that. And when you get to the end of doing the P, the last word you think of, use that word and do the same thing over.
Oh,
and
okay.
what you'll find is that because there's a little bit of cognitive load that comes with that, the noise, the voices, the spinning, the nonsense has to be quiet, but it's boring enough that your brain will go back to sleep. I have never actually made it through 2 words. So
Okay.
that's a tool to get back to sleep in the middle of the night. You have to force your brain to do it though, because it's going to want to go wander off and worry about the thing. Force it to do the words thing. But that's not a solution to solve the problem. That just fixes it in the moment. To solve the problem, we have to get access to where the demons are, what's actually happening. And that requires, obviously, the gold standard is having a really good business savvy confidant to talk to and work through stuff. That is the gold standard, bar none. I get that the coaching world is a very deep pool full of very shallow people. It's hard to find a good coach. It took me years to find my coach. And now I'm like, do not go anywhere. Because he is my lifeline to talk to and to work through my stuff, which never hire a coach who doesn't have a coach. That's an aside. But if you can't find a coach, if you're in the process, you're looking, you haven't been able to find one, or your business isn't in a position right now for you to be able to do that. Although I will say, I can't afford it is an interesting excuse, and that's the whole self-sabotage issue. But if you can't do that, find ways to get access to your emotional brain. So your brain has largely 2 pieces that are relevant at this juncture. Your logical brain, which you want engaged in critical thinking and decision making and all of that. And then your emotional brain, which has all the feelings, the stress, the anxiety, all that stuff. Unfortunately, your emotional brain doesn't have access to language. And so all it gives your logical brain is stress, which is why if you've ever had a situation where you've said something and then thought, that sounds dumb when I say it out loud, it's the first time your logical brain has had access to it. If you can find ways to access your emotional brain during the day, it won't bubble up and interrupt your sleep. That can be meditation, journaling, walking, but don't listen to a podcast, working out, shaking your body, getting yourself out of the red zone and back into a yellow zone where you can think critically, shaking your body. Those are all great ways to recognize when you're ending up in a space where you're not thinking critically and managing the stress that may keep you awake in the middle of the night.
And just talking about some of those things. So meditation, would you recommend that in the morning or throughout the day,
I
or?
would recommend it whenever you can make it work. For me, meditation is a challenge. It's something I've tried to do and haven't had good success with, but I would recommend doing it whenever you can. Oh no, did I lose our internet connection? What happened?
There
Are you
you are.
back?
I'm back.
Oh,
We're back.
good.
We're good. We're good. We're good. And how about journaling? Is there any particular time do you want to do right before you go to sleep, get all that stuff out of you?
That's when I choose to journal. I choose to journal at night, and it's usually just what happened during the day and then maybe how I felt about it.
I'm a big sports fan, and we see people in sports and in life choke under
Mm.
pressure. What's going on in their minds? What would you suggest to people to help alleviate that kind of choking?
So choking under pressure is typically caused by our emotional brains flooding our logical brains, flooding the part of our brain we're trying to get to function. Obviously, our kinesthetic mind if you're working as an athlete. But how do you keep your emotional brain from flooding your logical brain? You give it access during the day. And that have you ever been in the shower and had a great idea and wondered, why do all great ideas happen in the shower? That's because it's when your logical mind is not as loud. You don't have a whole lot of input. Washing your hair doesn't take a lot of thought. So all of those kind of things are going to get better if you have access to your emotional brain through the things like journaling, meditation, talking to your
The shower
coach.
thing is interesting because I had a manager many years ago, and a lot of times he would say, I was in the shower and I had this great thought, and I was thinking, TMI, man, TMI,
Right? I
too
didn't need
much
to know
information.
that.
I don't, keep that to yourself. But that's interesting that you're saying that in the shower you can, get
Mm-hmm.
these.
And then the self-sabotage around that issue, which is ignoring your health and well-being, sleep, diet, exercise, they're going to sabotage your future. They just are. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're not taking care of your success.
So you have a 5-point paradigm on how to create success out of chaos.
I
Can you kind of
do.
go over the high points there of that?
Absolutely. So my favorite question when I work with a client on this, my favorite question is, what would you like to be different? Because if I say to someone, what's your goal? What's your dream? You get kind of these esoteric pie in the sky things sometimes. But if I say to you, what's broken? What do you want to be different? People can talk about this isn't working, that isn't working. And from that, we can figure out, okay, then what does different look like? And then you have, okay, now we have a goal, we have a place to go. But what do you want to be different is a great place to start. And once you have that and you've kind of figured out what do you want to be different, then you can look at what are the tactical ways that we can go about fixing that. I like to use problem deconstruction, which is break it down. A good example is if you wanted to write a book. You don't sit down and write a book in a day. That's not how it works. You sit down and you're like, what subjects do I want to write about? Maybe I write 1,000 words a day, but break it down into bite-sized pieces. Do your problem deconstruction. Then you can also do backcasting. I got to my successful end. How did you get here? What did that look like? What did the journey look like if you were going to backcast from the successful end? I also like pre-mortem. You tried to do the thing and you didn't get there. It didn't work. What got in your way? What stopped you? How did you not overcome whatever happened? Doing that pre-mortem helps us think about not just this is going to be great, I'm going to make it, but this is going to have hurdles. How am I going to overcome them? Once you know where you're going and how you want to get there, then you can start to equip yourself. This is going to be resources, skills, knowledge, processes. And the thing I always remind people about, you don't have to do it all yourself. You don't have to learn it. You can hire people who know the things. You can invite partners. You can, like, I know so many technically brilliant human beings who start startups and then they don't know how to run the business. Bring in a CEO. Bring in somebody like this guy, Mark, I know, who can help you. Right? Don't do it all yourself when it comes to equipping yourself. And then you need to look for your psychological barriers. This is going to be, you know what you should be doing, you're not doing it. That's going to be a thing. It's not your fault. You may have demons from your past that bubble up. It is your problem. You do have to fight those demons and figure it out. And the interesting thing about the psychological barriers, the solution is in the present. Today, what are you going to do today? The cause is in the past. How you got here, in the past. But the motivation is in the future. The motivation is your future self is in a better place. Unfortunately, humans are really bad at doing good things for people they don't know, and you don't know your future self. So you've got to find a way to drag that motivation from the future into today, because the easiest thing to do is to let today be a continuation of yesterday, and then tomorrow has no chance to be different.
Do you help people mentally look at what their future self is? So if I had a certain goal and I wanted to get that goal by 5 years, do you help them with a picture of me celebrating having that goal?
Sometimes we do celebration of the goal. The thing I like to ask my clients is, tell me why that's amazing. Tell me why that's something you want to do, because that speaks to motivation and it also speaks to value. So if I can understand what do you want to be different and why different is better, that's going to help us.
Interesting. Great.
And then the fifth point of the paradigm is people, places, things, and habits that either help or hurt. That's the last part you have to look at, which goes back to stop looking at wells that don't have water.
Okay, excellent. Not sure if this is in your purview, but many people have terrible eating habits. 38% of Americans are considered obese. Any suggestions of what they can do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did do some continuing education at the Center of Nutrition Studies at Cornell. And so and this is not rocket science, but when you say it, some people get offended. Eat real food. Eat real food, vegetables. Eat plant-based things, not the fake stuff you buy that you microwave. Real plant-based things like vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds and grains, and real food that has fiber that you have to chew. And do you need to go completely 100% plant-based? No, we ended up going there because my gut was so much happier. But if you can move to being about 80% plant-based and actually track it, keep track of what you're eating, get rid of the processed food. This is not rocket science. People know this. Your mother's been telling you to eat your vegetables since you were 3.
Makes makes a tremendous amount of sense. In some of the things that I was reading about when I was looking at your website and watching your videos and everything, you talked about foresting project, looking at your life as a forest. Can you talk about that, please?
I absolutely can. This is one of those projects. It works really well when I do it with clients. It is possible to do it on your own. I have yet to get an email from anyone saying they completed it on their own, but I will absolutely tell you how it works.
Okay.
I like to use index cards. If you prefer electronic options, you're welcome to do that. But I like index cards. It's visceral and it really helps my clients. So I do color coding. Personal is one color, business is another color. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at everything, every person and everything that you do. And this includes in if you volunteer or you have committees you're on or boards, everything gets, every person, everything gets an individual card. And you write, like I would, if I were going to do it, I would write my husband's name, Russ, on one. I might write my mother-in-law's name, Lucy, on one, but a card for every person. Then you're going to go get a feeling words list. You can just Google feeling words list and pick one. It doesn't matter. And I want you to write on the back of that card 3 to 5 words that describe how you feel about that person. And then I want you to estimate how much time do you spend with that person or on that task? And how much time do you want to spend? And this is per week with that person on that task, plus or minus. How much more, how much less? And you're going to do this across the board, every task, every person. Feeling words, how much time do you spend? How much time do you want to spend? What I will absolutely tell you will happen for sure is that by the end of it, if you added up all the time that you spend, you're going to have more hours than there are in a week, even if you weren't sleeping, because people vastly overestimate how much time they spend. But the reason that this project is helpful is it really lets you look at, from your critical mind, how am I feeling about this person or task? What does this mean to me? And you're going to notice it creates kind of this forest of cards, because you get this kind of downward look. And you're going to realize some of these need fertilizer. I am not spending enough time with these people or on this task. Some of them need to be pruned. I am wasting my time on this. I should delegate this. What am I doing? You may find holes. You may need to plant a new tree. You may find a place where you're like, oh, this is empty. I'm not going to have anything. And then you may have trees that you need to like uproot and burn. And you may realize that if you get a card that has all negative words on the back, that's a good place to start looking about what is going on with this.
Boy, I hope I don't become part of a negative index card from someone else.
Right?
No, that's excellent, and that leads into one other thing is your traffic light model. Do you
Oh,
want to talk a
yeah.
little bit about that as
I
well?
would love to share the traffic light model. So the traffic light model is all about understanding your psychological state and only having conversations or making decisions when you're mentally and prepared, emotionally prepared to do so. And that means you can avoid having hit and run conversations where someone grabs you in the hall or like, hey, they sabotage you by grabbing you. And you're like, oh, you can avoid those. So first thing you have to do is if you're on, think about a scale from 0 to 10. 0 is it's so bad, I should just go back to bed and start over. And 10 is it's so euphoric, I may have died and gone to heaven, right? So if you think about that on a scale, when I ask people like, where are you? Generally speaking, I'll get 6, 7, sometimes an 8. Like I'll get those numbers. But I don't ever want my clients to have to every moment of the day, where am I on a scale from 0 to 10? It's just, there's too many options. It's overwhelming. So it's been broken down really nicely into the traffic light model. If you think about red, and if you can invert it, red was from 0 to 4. Yellow is about 4 to 7. And then green is 7 to 10. And you can tell there's overlap because there's no delineation like, oh, I just went from yellow to red. There's kind of a orange gradient, there's gradients. But if you're going into a critical situation, this can be a critical conversation, this could be, any kind of serious situation, just take a second pause. Where am I? Am I green, yellow, or red? Ideal performance is going to happen in the 6 to 8 range because you need a little bit of stress because, stress is on a bell curve. Too little, you don't get off the couch. Too much, you don't get off the couch. Just enough. And you're ready to focus, you're ready to be in flow, you're ready to do the thing. So kind of the 6 to 8 range, that bright yellow green area. If you get up into the 9.5, 10 range, you're probably too euphoric. Do not sign contracts. You will not read them. You will think the world is an amazing place that's made of rainbows and puppy dogs. Do not sign contracts if you are that green. Wait until you enjoy it, but then wait until you're able to focus and read the contract in full and make sure it's in your best interest. Equally, if you are down in red, do not have important conversations. Do not do anything. Go for a walk. Shake your body. In I can't even say it, Qigong, there's this thing called turning vitality into stress into vitality, where you just shake. If you notice that you're in red, if you can just find a private place to just move your body, even just a little bit, it'll bring you back up into yellow. If you think the person you're talking to is in red, stop talking to them. You are not going to have a good conversation. So that's broadly how you use the traffic light model. Just check in with yourself. Am I green, yellow, or red? Is this the best state for me to be in to engage in the thing I want to engage in right now?
Dr. Robyn, I can't say how much information that you've given us all, some great tools that you've given us and provided for all of us. I really love everything that we've talked about. I always like to end with this question. Any question that I should have asked that I didn't, or is there any parting words of encouragement that you'd like to give the audience?
Well, the thing that you asked that people usually forget to ask is about the water in the well. So I'm really thankful that we got to have that conversation. But the thing I guess I want to end on is you can burn hot, you can burn fast. You don't have to burn out. That's a choice.
Excellent, excellent way of saying that. That's a mic drop. I'm going to give you a little mic drop there. So, Dr. Robyn, thank you so much for joining us here on Coffee with Krav. For those of you that love Coffee with Krav, we're going to be back January 8th. We're going to have Stephanie Link. Yes, the Stephanie Link from CNBC. She's going to be joining me 10 o'clock a.m. January 8th. Mark it down in your calendar. Uh, Dr. Robyn, thank you so much,
Thank you,
and
Mark.
we'll see everybody soon. Take care. Bye bye.